Hi, my name is Dr. Calynn Lawrence, and I am the founder of the Holistic Healing Source for Marginalized Society. I am a board certified forensic traumatologist and a doctorally prepared pastoral counselor. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson. I will share my screen. Sorry, it's taking a little bit to load. It's almost there. Sorry, I apologize for the wait. There we are. Navigating cultural differences and prejudice in the workplace when building a diverse team. Workplaces today are increasingly prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing the myriad of benefits that a heterogeneous workforce can bring to organizational performance, innovation, and employee well being. However, despite multifaceted organizational attempts to diversify, many workplaces remain segregated and stratified across hierarchical and occupational lines. This stratification often leads to persistent pay gaps and underrepresentation of minorities in upper echelons and troubling disparities in workplace dignity and well being. The endeavor to build a diverse team is not simply a matter of recruitment. It involves the complex and ongoing task of navigating cultural differences and addressing ingrained prejudices that can hinder the successful integration of diverse talent. To truly foster an inclusive environment, organizations must look beyond surface level metrics. They must understand the nuances of cultural competence, the impact of occupational expertise on evaluating differences, the influence of cross cultural values on work life integration, and the profound effects of diversity on workplace safety. This training explores these critical themes, drawing on recent research to provide a comprehensive overview of the challenges and actionable strategies involved in navigating cultural differences and prejudice when building and sustaining a diverse team. The challenges of conceptualizing and applying cultural competence. One of the foundational steps in building a diverse team is developing cultural competence among employees and organizational leadership. In fields that inherently serve diverse populations, such as social work, professionals are explicitly mandated by regulating bodies to engage with diversity and difference in order to practice cultural competence. Because these professions serve a population encompassing humanity's extensive list of intersecting backgrounds and identities, the very essence of cultural competence comprises fundamental complications in its overall conceptualization, construct, and application of theory to practice. A study exploring the challenges faced by newly employed social workers found that navigating these differences as novice professionals is fraught with difficulties. These newly employed professionals frequently reported areas for growth regarding feelings of inadequacy when interacting with diverse groups. Furthermore, they experienced frustration with fundamental organizational barriers that prevented them from applying culturally competent care, and they even faced prejudice from the clients themselves. These findings emphasize the multifaceted nature of cultural competence. When building diverse teams, leaders must recognize that employees may feel unequipped to handle complex cultural dynamics without substantial organizational backing. Structural barriers must be dismantled, and continuous training must be provided to facilitate true integration and competence in the workplace. The double edged sword of expertise in evaluating cultural differences. A central factor in the persistence of organizational stratification is how cultural differences are expressed by minority employees and subsequently evaluated by embedded experts within the workplace. Organizations possess strong local norms, such as moral ascriptions to diversity and ideal worker expectations regarding presence and dedication, that shape how cultural differences are interpreted. In a study of an apprenticeship program that recruited individuals from economically disadvantaged neighborhoods into a traditional media organization, researchers found that apprentices commonly expressed cultural diversity through four distinct principles: cultural brokering, problem solving, adapting, and affirming. Through cultural brokering and problem solving, apprentices applied distinctive knowledge derived from their backgrounds to occupational tasks. For example, cultural brokering allowed them to bridge differing cultural backgrounds and provide novel experiential knowledge that permanent journalists valued but could not wield themselves. Problem solving involved applying a background of overcoming adversity to tackle difficult situations or manage unrewarding tasks. Both of these practices were positively evaluated by permanent employees because they were construed as valuable, knowledge based expert practices. Adapting, which involved blending culturally divergent self presentations with local norms regarding dress and demeanor, was also appraised positively once a settlement with local expectations was reached. However, the practice of affirming, where apprentices revealed, defended, or supported diverse cultural identities independently of occupational expertise, was evaluated negatively by permanent staff. Managers and colleagues perceived affirming as a counter to expectations of expertise and interpreted as stemming from a lack of requisite knowledge. In essence, affirming was viewed as a threat to the occupations as spaces of expertise and as a threat to the expert identities of the existing members. This dynamic reveals normative ideals grounded in expertise, which define merit not by personal identity, but by demonstrated knowledge and practice. Apprentices who developed practices construed as expert were more likely to be recruited into permanent positions, whereas those primarily engaged in affirming were evaluated as breaching professional ideals. This demonstrates the double edged sword of expertise. While it legitimizes some practices as valuable and marks some workers as ideal, it also marginalizes others by framing their performative cultural expressions as breaches of professional ideals, thereby reinforcing a narrow standard of merit. Cross cultural differences and the changing landscape of work. As globalization and the digitalization of society lead to fundamental alterations in the labor sphere, global trends and turbulent times are stipulating the emergence of new norms of labor relations and employee models. Thinking critically about these ongoing transformation processes requires monitoring new phenomena and understanding the directions of human resource management. Cross-cultural analysis reveals that the social and cultural features of respondents from different countries significantly impact their assessment of workplace transformations, such as those brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, and influence companies' human resources management practices. Furthermore, cultural values play a significant role in how employees manage the boundaries between their work and personal lives. Despite abundant research on work life boundaries, the role of culture is often overlooked. Research integrating cultural values into the continuum of work life integration and segmentation posits that individuals in individualistic cultures are more likely to attain work life segmentation. In contrast, people in collectivist cultures are more likely to attain work life integration. This distinction is shaped by role identity patterns, implying that boundary management strategies differ significantly across different cultures. Managers building globally or culturally diverse teams must account for these varied preferences to ensure that workplace policies accommodate the psychological needs of their workforce. Enhancing workplace safety through diversity. While cultural background and geographic diversity are critical components of team building, organizations must also consider the tangible impacts of other forms of diversity, such as gender diversity, on the workplace environment. Research exploring the impact of workforce gender composition on operational safety within U.S. listed firms found that firms with a more gender diverse workforce composition report fewer time lost injuries. This positive effect on physical safety is especially pronounced in companies experiencing high labor turnover and those with large income stream variability. The presence of a gender diverse workforce is not only beneficial but critical for enhancing psychologically safe and inclusive climates in the workplace, which in turn reduces the frequency and severity of workplace injuries. This highlights an often overlooked aspect of operations management. Diversity is not just a moral imperative or a driver of innovation, it is also a fundamental component of physical and psychological safety. Managers can actively leverage gender diversity for safety enhancement, while government agencies can use these insights to develop policies that encourage a safer and more inclusive workplace environment. Strategies for recruitment, retention, and inclusion. To successfully build and maintain a diverse team, organizations must implement targeted strategies for both recruitment and retention. While there has been increased interest and attention paid to the need for equity, diversity, and inclusion across various fields, focusing on how companies can actually promote and sustain a diverse workforce remains a vital challenge. Organizations can make important strides by embedding the mission to serve marginalized communities into their core values, as demonstrated by small companies providing applied behavior analytics services. Providing examples and recommendations for these overarching goals is essential for real world application. Practical recommendations include rethinking recruitment channels to reach marginalized communities, offering professional development opportunities tailored to the unique challenges faced by diverse employees, and actively working to mitigate the organizational barriers that lead to feelings of inadequacy and burnout. Moreover, organizations must train leadership to recognize how their biases regarding expertise might inadvertently penalize diverse employees who express their cultural identities differently. By moving away from rigid, narrow standards of merit and embracing a broader definition of professional contribution, organizations can foster true inclusion rather than demanding mere assimilation. In conclusion, navigating cultural differences and prejudice in the workplace is an ongoing dynamic process that requires intentional effort from both individuals and organizations. As the research demonstrates, simply hiring a diverse workforce is insufficient if the organizational culture rapidly and rigidly evaluates difference through the narrow lens of traditional expertise and penalizes authentic cultural expression. Organizations must address the fundamental complications inherent in applying cultural competence, accommodate cross cultural differences in work life boundary management, and recognize the profound impact that diverse teams have on creating psychologically and physically safe work environments. By monitoring global changes in labor relations and implementing targeted recommendations for the recruitment and retention of diverse talent, organizations can transform their workplaces into truly inclusive environments where all employees have the opportunity to thrive, contribute their unique strengths, and drive organizational success. And here are the references if you would like to view those. Thank you for listening.